HDR. Okay. Okay, so welcome back to part three, and hopefully, this is the final episode of our discussion on what actually happened on 3rd May or May 3, 2023, where large scale violence between the Meitei and Cookies or slash Kuki-Zo communities erupted. We already covered the incidents, the violence, and the incidents that happened in, I wouldn't call it violence in Lamka, Churchanpur, because there was no violence. In fact, we protected them in Lamka. We covered the incidents in Lamka, Churchanpur. We covered the incidents in the border areas between Churchanpur and Bishnupur districts. We also covered Imphal, the violence that took place in Imphal. While we also made it clear that while burning of houses started in Kangwai, Torbung areas, there was no killing of anyone, and there was also no intent to kill. I mean, people out of anger destroying each other's property. It was understandable to an extent, but the intent, the genocidal intent, was not there from the Kuki side. This has to be made very clear. Our professor has argued very beautifully uh, concerning those why he believes that Meiteis had a genocidal intent and the Kukis did not. If we look at the FIRs that have been filed, the killings that have taken place, the bodies discovered in Imphal, and all of the videos coming out of Imphal, so it is very clear that Meiteis have genocidal intent. Now we also covered Kangwai and all those surrounding places. Now we need to discuss the role of government in this conflict, because as we know very clearly that the government most likely, I mean, it's not fair to call it they slept, but it looks like the government allowed the situation to spiral out of control to the extent of even allowing mobs to loot their armories. I mean, tell me, Professor, is it can any does any mob, forget Meitei, Kuki, any mob, does any mob have the power or the right to claim that their life is under threat, so they are gonna loot armories? Can that is does that justification even make any sense at all?
Okay. It does to some extent. So let me explain. So one of the videos that went viral on 3rd May is a group of people, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen people, going towards Torbung Kangwai. And among them, there were 2 or 3 people that had AK-47 rifles. Um, so I believe these were established militant groups, or at least those people who were carrying guns were militants. And I tried to find out what happened. So I asked people around, and I also asked Dr. Sailen Haukep, who is the spokesperson for KNO. And what people told me was that when uh, this ransacking of houses at Kangwai happened, um, this militant group, I don't know which one, which was close to that area, they got the word and they came to defend the cookies, to ward off the
Meitei
Meitei mobs.
attackers. Yeah.
And Dr. Sailen also told me exactly the same thing. After the Anglo-Kuki War Memorial Gate was attempted to be burnt, that word went out. And in addition, there was also a word apparently received by this particular Sioux group that there was a huge mob of Meiteis which had assembled at Kangwai, and they were backed by a Meitei SP and Manipur police commandos. So these Kuki militants, they went to confront them. And so that, I believe, was the video that went viral. And the location of the video is the gap between the Torbung village and Kangwai village. There's about a half a kilometer gap between them. And the video also shows that there were fumes of smoke rising from the place they were heading to, right? That was, they were heading to Kangwai, and there were huge fumes of smoke rising from there. So Kangwai houses were already being burned by the time they were attempting to go there. But Dr. Sailan tells me that they did confront the Meitei mob and the police, and those people went away. And he says no shots were fired by either side. So that is what we know. That is the facts as far as we know. However, when the video went viral, then Meitei started asking, according to various testimonies that we hear, Meitei started asking, if they have guns, we need to have guns too, and that's how they went about looting armories.
But then some of the armories were already looted on May 3 itself before those.
We are talking about May 3 itself, right? So they
Okay.
were looted during the night of May 3. After they found that cookies had arms then, and they did not. Well, some of them did have arms,
Do you
right? So
believe
we have a video where Korungbamba Kuman was going to Kangwai, and we have a video where he is shooting his hand revolver into the air, or maybe towards the cookies. So people have found and placed him in Kangwai around 4 or 5 p.m. And Arambai Tengol was there, right? Probably from the beginning, because one of the people whose death is recorded on 4th May. So remember, I mentioned that Ukrul Times went to the RIMS hospital and found 4 names of people who had died.
Yeah.
One of them was an Arambai Tengol worker or fighter, whatever you want to call him, from the Ithai village. And he was apparently shot at Torbung, and he died in the hospital the next morning. So that tells us that Arambai Tengol was there, right? And Arambai Tengol knew that this fact had become public. They, in fact, collected his body and paraded it through all the towns while bringing him back, and he was given a martyr's burial. Funeral. I don't know whether they buried him or cremated him. So Arambai Tengol did not hide the fact that their fighters were there in Torbung Kangwai. But later on, when Tano Jambrinda said that they were there, then there was a huge uproar, and Arambai Tengol contradicted her, saying that we had nothing to do with it, but they
Went to
did,
her
right?
house,
They did.
destroyed flower pots and couple of other stuff they destroyed in her house, I believe.
Yeah.
Forcing her
But
to.
I believe she stuck to her story. I believe she stuck to her story.
Really? I thought she retracted it.
No, she said that I clarified. She didn't clarify anything. Well, she said that I don't know this for a fact. I heard this from sources and I believed them, or something of that kind.
Okay.
But she never said that it was false. I mean, after she made these statements, then again there was a phone call she made to a journalist, and then that was recorded by the Meiteis and circulated on social media. Anyway, so there was a long story, but let's not go there. Another thing that Cookies did was also that when they went to attack Meitei neighborhood, so this is something we missed talking about earlier. So according to the East Mojo reporter, there was one locality that they had burned down on the 3rd May. And I believe that was, what's that called? Kumujamba Lekai. So I believe that was the neighborhood they burned down on 3rd May. So when they went to attack that, the residents who had arms shot at them, and 2 or 3 people were killed.
So the Meitei
Um,
residents in Kumujamba had guns.
had guns, and they shot at them. Um, some of them had. We don't know how many of them had, but some of them had.
Anyway, Kumujamba is infested with VBIGs and all these Meitei insurgents. It's all Meitei alcohol sellers and insurgents mostly, most of them in Kumujamba, dealing in all this
Yeah.
illicit stuff.
I don't know enough detail, but this is one of the things that happened. So I think it was probably after that that Cookies went and looted a arms shop, an arms gun shop in Churachandpur, which was owned by a Meitei shop owner. So he has made several statements about this. And so that was a second fact that was also circulated among the Meiteis. Now, we should keep in mind that the shop would have had normal guns, right? It would not have had AK-47s. So they were not, and
Most
they would
likely,
not
most
have had.
likely looted for the bullets, I believe, because the what is that bullet they use for hunting rifles? Yeah.
Yeah. So these were the things that inflamed the Meiteis, and then they went and got their own guns. And I mean, Bimo Lakoijam made a big deal about it, saying, the first looting was done by Cookies, right? And then Professor Housing put him in place, saying, let's not compare apples and oranges. This happened on live TV. So now Okoijam says, yes, maybe they were not advanced guns, but Cookies looted them first, and then the Meiteis did, right? So that's his justification.
Did Akoijam accept that? The counter argument from Professor Housing, did he accept it?
Apparently he did, because in a later presentation, he said maybe they were not advanced guns, advanced weapons.
It's very surprising that Akoijam would accept an argument from our side, would agree to an argument from our side. It's very surprising.
Okay, but later on, after the proper statistics about weapons looting were published, then the police officers themselves said that the looting done by the two sides are not comparable. Only maybe 5% of the looted arms were looted by Cookies.
Those are just hunting rifles, not
No,
LMGs
no.
and
Cookies also apparently looted police armories, but in Churachandpur district, but probably there weren't very many arms there.
yeah.
So the police themselves estimated that the looted arms in Cookie hands were only about 5% of the total.
30
So the
guns.
bulk of them were looted by the Meiteis. But anyway, Cookies, I think, have access to arms from other places. Of course, they had to pay for them. They weren't looted. But they have acquired arms from across the border over a period of time. And then both the sides had advanced weapons, including machine guns and
even without looting the police armories, Meiteis also have thousands and thousands of guns, like at least 40,000-50,000 guns. I mean, all of the insurgent outfits like UNLF and PLA, these are all very powerful and strong insurgent outfits. You can't compare them to Cookie outfits, which is like what some of them have 30 cadres, some have 180. I mean, come on, Meiteis have thousands. They are in the thousands. The cadre strength is in the thousands. I mean, tens of thousands. They even kidnap young people to serve in their insurgents. Anyway, we are slightly deviating away. Please continue, Professor.
Right. So you were asking me, what did the government do, right? And the government was, I mean, we have to back up a little bit, right? Where did the government come from? Um, and we have Biren Singh's alleged testimony in the Manipur tapes where he expresses his own motivations. And the motivations were that cookies were expanding in Imphal. They set up a lot of wings. So, apparently that bothered him. And cookies were taking over the secretariat because, all he says all the departments, the head secretaries were cookies. And he says Nagas were not bothered. Nagas were happy doing their secessionist agenda. They were not into bureaucracy, but cookies were taking over bureaucracy. And he also mentions that cookies were expanding villages and things of that kind, right? So these village expansion things, setting up new villages or things of that kind. So those were the reasons he gives in the Manipur tapes, alleged Manipur tapes, because he still claims that it wasn't his recording. But there is a second important factor, which is that Kuki-Zo groups had been negotiating with the center over a period of time. And at the beginning of May, it was essentially agreed between the center and the Sioux groups that cookies would be given a territorial council deal similar to the Bodo land. So that agreement was supposed to be signed during that same week as the 3rd May. And one of the things that has been mentioned is that when Biren Singh, well, this was mentioned by Kohur, Kohur's report says that when Biren Singh heard that this agreement had been reached, then he picked up the phone and called somebody and said, start the war. Okay, so this is Kohur's testimony. So in that sense, the violence was orchestrated from Biren Singh's side. And PUCL report also says that the violence was orchestrated. They don't say who orchestrated it, but they see evidence based on the testimonies they heard. They see evidence that it was orchestrated. And they also mention, again, gathered from testimonies, that they also mentioned that the police stood by and watched or in many times cooperated with the attackers. So what was the government doing? This was what it was doing, at least as far as the Manipur government is concerned. It was fully participant in the Manipur violence. Now, we can also gather that the center probably understood this, and that's why it tried to reduce the powers of the state government by appointing security advisor, by appointing a new DGP, and by pumping in central forces, etc. And I mentioned in the last broadcast as well that these measures did help. They reduced the amount of violence and they reduced the amount of damage the cookies suffered. So that's what the central government did. It could have done more and it should have done more, but at least it tried to balance the, advantage the Meiteis had in the conflict by having control over the government and the police and the infrastructure. So that's what I would say the government was doing. Now, if we want to fast forward a little bit, so, Assam Rifles controlled the violence in Churachandpur. I don't know much about what happened in Moray, but in Churachandpur, the violence was controlled during the first night. And after that, there was no violence in the remainder. But in Imphal, it continued until essentially all cookies had been ethnically cleansed.
So,
And then, yeah.
so there was a movement of people from Moreh to Imphal, right?
Yes, that evacuation happened from the 3rd May itself, right? So Assam Rifles had posted tweets saying they had rescued so many Meiteis from Moreh. And since Moreh is in the middle of Kuki region, and it's very far from the valley, they were felt to be highly at risk, and therefore they were, removed to the Imphal Valley pretty early in the conflict. We don't know the
I
exact
was gonna
timetable.
ask why Meiteis got priority removal, but you have already answered that.
Yeah, if the violence was orchestrated, then the orchestrators also knew that Meiteis would be at risk, and therefore they removed them from the conflict zone.
Okay, good. So overall, Meiteis were removed from two places, from Moreh and in from Churchanpur, from Lamka.
Yeah, and probably from Kangpokpi as well.
Yeah,
Even
I
though
mean,
Kangpokpi is a bit more
how many
open.
Meiteis will be in Kangpopi? Like hardly 200, 300 Meiteis in Kangpopi. It's not that many. And anyway, Meiteis don't like to stay in Kangpopi also. It's not hospitable for them. I mean, Lamka or Churchanpur was one way. They had a colony there. In Moreh also they have a colony. But in Kangpopi, they don't have any colony. They have nothing. Most of them will be living in rented houses and doing some business, engaged in selling all these fermented fish and all. Okay, so let's continue to. Uh, did I hope you have covered almost whatever you wanted to say. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you.
Um, well, no, I mean, now we get to the important bit. So, what happened afterwards, after the first 3 days, right? So, cookies were then evacuated after this shootout in Chirachandpur. Cookies were also evacuated, and they were brought to camps in Chirachandpur, Kangpokpi, etc. And it is then that the cookie population learned what had happened in the Imphal Valley. So by 12th May, cookies had known what had happened. And that's when all the 10 cookie MLAs got together and put out a joint demand saying that they want a separate administration. So they said, our people cannot live with Meiteis anymore. And Imphal Valley is like a death to our people. So it's not possible to live with Meiteis anymore. We want the cookies need a separate administration. So that happened on the 12th May. And it looks like Biren Singh was called to Delhi and had a meeting with Amit Shah. And on 16th May, there was news reports saying that he rejected the demand. And then he said we should live in peace and amity and stuff of that kind.
Which he himself doesn't even
Um,
believe, I'm sure.
yeah. But the to and fro is that cookies have made a demand which goes to the heart of the Meitei vision of Manipur, right? So they've argued for territorial integrity of Manipur for a long time. And if you remember, even before Biren Singh came to power during Gibobi Singh ministry, there were issues with Tangkuls wanting NSC and IM fighting for separation.
I think the first
And the
the first
Kokobi,
the
this,
first friction with the Manipur Nagas and the Meiteis started way back in 2000s when the ceasefire was extended without territorial limits, which means
yes.
ceasefire between the government of India and NSA and IM covered Manipur also, and that angered so many Meiteis that they burned the state library. And today,
I see.
after they have burned the state libraries, a lot of the important colonial records and documents are gone. And I can see a lot of fake documents from the colonial area, so not area, sorry, era, floating around on internet these days, claiming it to be genuinely authentic, but there's no way of authenticating them anymore because the library has been burned.
Yeah.
So okay, anyway, sorry, I'm interrupting you. Please
Yeah,
continue.
but the territorial integrity of Manipur concept probably arose there, and that now, you know, that resurfaced after the cookie demand for separate administration. And sometime in June, in early June, Kokomi declared quote unquote national emergency. Kokomi is the premier Meitei civil society organization at the moment, a coordinating committee. So it's many CSOs together set up this umbrella group called Kokomi. So they declared a quote unquote national emergency of Manipur. And they also declared that they're now in the midst of a Manipuri national war against Chin Kuki narco terrorists. That is the term they used. So this narco terrorist thing has been added just to make it look like they're doing something legitimate. But essentially, they declared war against cookies.
Yeah.
So since then, it has been a civil war-like situation where Meiteis have basically attempted to crush the cookie resistance, to fight them along the foothill areas, and to storm them wherever they could. So we had such things happening. I mean, Sugnu is a bit of a special case because it is kind of a border area between um, the three or four districts. But it is officially in the Imphal Valley, even though there are many cookies that live there as well. So Sugnu local people had a peace pact among themselves, saying that we are not going to fight each other. And then that was broken, presumably by Arambai Tangals coming and attacking cookies.
I think cookies have vacated Suknu, right?
Yes.
It
And then they drove out Meiteis from Serao in retaliation, I think.
okay.
So that might be considered, the first attack on first part, first incident of the civil war in the foothills. And the second major instance, I think, was the Common Lock clash that happened in June. And then there were several other such incidents in Palail, and there was an attack in the island block in the Taubal Valley. And then after all these things were kind of settled down, then there was an attack. Then the attack started happening in Jiribam
No, one
in
hold on. Let
2024.
me let's just go back for just 1 minute. The attack on Pallel involved Manipur police personnel.
All of these involved,
Yeah.
all
And
of these attacks involved Manipur police personnel.
no, especially the Pallel one is important because Grishma Kuthar was there when it happened and she had written an article for the caravan and submitted videos and pictures, and even in fact they were pointing guns at each other, the Assam rifles who were in Pallel and the Manipur police along with the Arambais on their side pointing guns at the Assam rifles, if you remember correctly. That incident had taken place.
Yeah, but her analysis is a bit deeper. Um, what she says is that UNLF militants went to attack the Kuki villages at the periphery of Paleo. And then they were caught. I mean, the cookies, since they were at higher heights, they were able to defend themselves. And the UNLF was in a bind. And then the village started getting burned, Palil areas started getting burnt in order to provide a cover to evacuate the UNLF from there. Okay, so that's what she says. But it was another stage of the civil war. Right? So wherever there are Kuki villages in the neighborhood, if they could attack them, they attacked. And fortunately, in all cases, Kukis eventually prevailed. And therefore, by the time Biren Singh's day came, it was a stalemate. And then, of course, the Manipur tapes and all happened, and then the Supreme Court case, and the Meitei MLAs themselves started rebelling. So there were 18 Meitei MLAs, including Khem Chand, who wrote to the Prime Minister in October 2024, asking for the removal of Biren Singh. And Congress, Manipur Congress, declared that they were going to move a no confidence motion.
which they never
And
did.
well, so Biren Singh resigned before that confidence vote came to the floor. Right? So Biren Singh basically avoided the confidence vote, or he was asked to avoid the confidence vote.
Okay, let me just if we understand Manipur's history, there was a conflict with the Meiteis and Pangals as well, and at the end of the conflict, the Pangals had been completely subjugated, and maybe the Biren Singh's intention could have been maybe okay, let's do it, let's do another round of Pangal versus Meitei, but this time with cookies, and maybe their desired result would have been by the end of the conflict, cookies would remain totally subservient and be subjugated, and we could now be called Meitei cookies. Who knows?
No, what happened with Pangals was not a conflict, it was a massacre.
Yeah, but even in our case, it's a massacre in Imphal.
Actually, more Pangals died in one day than cookies died in those 3 days. I think something like 90 to 100 people died in one day in the Pangal massacre. And only like 2 or 3 Meiteis. But that was within the Imphal Valley, so it was easier to control, I suppose.
What do you mean
But
easier to control? If it was easier to control, how did 90 people die in one day?
well, before the police could organize themselves. I mean, at that time, the government was not driving this.
Okay.
Okay, it was most likely the militant groups, insurgent groups,
Yes.
that tried to poison the people. And I don't know. That's another very complicated, very complicated story. So let's not delve too much into it. But rumors were circulated, and hatred was generated, and large number of Pangals were killed within a single day. That's what happened there. And what is called clash was a minor one, right? It was at that bridge, Lelong Bridge. So Pangal stood on one side and the Meiteis on the other side, and there was a bit of shooting. It was a minor clash. And I don't think very many people died in that clash either.
The damage of properties this time is far more than the Pangal massacre.
Yeah, but
Economic
the
loss
loss of
is
life was higher there, but here the property loss is much higher.
no, but we have to specify that
So
property loss of cookies is much higher.
yeah, in monetary terms, but I don't think that is the end of the story, because after cookies learned what had happened in the Imphal, they completely razed the Meitei neighborhoods within their areas.
Only
Right? That
Kumujamba. The ones in More are still standing.
okay. I don't know enough about Moray, but Kumujamba was So whatever was burned down during the first day, but after that, later on, they completely came and leveled it and bulldozed it and
Yeah.
taken everything away. Um, but there were also a few other neighborhoods in Churachandpur where Meiteis had lived, and I believe they were also completely destroyed. Um, so I mean, Meiteis also suffered property loss. Maybe in monetary terms, the value is not that high, because there would have been only houses and small shops, whereas cookies in Imphal, they were living in prosperous areas and they were running major establishments like shopping malls and movie theaters and all that kind of stuff.
Not just that, yeah. Most of the cookies in Imphal are retired bureaucrats or retired bureaucrats, and generations of wealth that they have accumulated from all this working for the government. I mean, crores and crores they would have spent building a house, and in Manipur, anyways, construction cost is very high. It's not compared to other states. It's very very high. I mean, they don't have their own sand, this and that. They have to get it from Assam. They have to get it from all these other places. It's very high. Even to build a small house, it still costs a lot of money. So imagine like all these buildings, huge, massive buildings owned by cookies must have cost millions of dollars, and they just burned it, destroyed it. Many of them. The first Cookie IS officer, there was a guy called T. Kipgen. Even his house, which is an old heritage kind of a property, also burned. No sympathy, nothing. Anyway, we'll conclude this session and then we'll continue again the next session.